Welcome to the TrustBridge Capital monthly video series entitled Asking for a Friend. I'm your host, Eric Jefferson, and for this month's installment, we're going to focus not only on inflation, but specifically attempt to quantify the bite that it takes on long-term wealth. Inflation, certainly a topic that's been in the headline for the last 18 months, hit a record high in end of last year, started to see some gradual progress back to that 2% long-term average, but want to take a deeper dive going through the mechanics of it, what causes it, and more importantly, try and quantify why the Federal Reserve, led by Chairman Powell, is so intently focused on getting those figures back to their long-term averages. Now, before we get started, we have a few quick words from our legal team. And with that, we can go ahead, dive right in. And as I do, I'd like to begin by first defining what is inflation. Certainly a concept familiar to most, the textbook definition, the increase in general price levels of goods and services in a specific economy. In the United States, that is measured by the Consumer Price Index. That is a basket of common or household items that the price is then tracked over time as a way to monitor or gauge changes in inflation. And as stated, the Federal Reserve's target, that is the institution tasked with keeping us on track with long-term price stability. Their goal is 2% annually. Now, obviously, that figure will fluctuate from year to year, but on average, we talk about that long-term goal of 2%. Now, when we think about inflation, it's certainly not bad. It is a sign of a healthy economy. We think about what causes it. As economy is growing, typically companies are now paying higher wages to employees. That in turn is going to trigger more consumer spending. Increasing consumer spending will put greater demand for goods and services. That in turn then results in higher prices for those goods and services. Companies generate more revenue, and then the cycle continues. They pay out higher wages in order to retain their talent. Now, certainly there's many causes that go into inflation. That's a very simplified example, but at its core, inflation isn't necessarily bad. The problem, though, when we think longer term, particularly higher levels of it, it does reduce the purchasing power for consumers. And so for those on a fixed budget, say that are maybe retired, aren't participating in the workforce, enjoying those higher wages paid out, that's where we can see meaningful increases in inflation really take a chunk out of what consumers are able to spend in a given month. That there lies the problem that inflation typically most negatively affects those that are least able to pay it. Now, when we try and quantify this, hypothetical example here, where we look at increases in price over a 40-year period, let's say this is over a lifespan of somebody's career. To illustrate this, let's say the price of a widget. This is any household item, a baseball glove, a hat, a type of food, whatever it is, price of a widget today is $10. Now, if you have $100, today you could go out doing some very simple arithmetic and purchase 10 widgets. Now, if we see the price of that widget steadily increase 2% each year every year, on average for the next 4 decades, the future price of that singular widget is going to be $22. Now, the same $100 40 years from now, at that price of 22, would only be able to purchase 4.5 widgets. So in comparison to the 10 able to purchase in today's dollars, that's roughly a 55% reduction or loss in purchasing power. That is with the Fed's long-term average of 2%. What happens though if inflation runs away and remains out of control? Well, even worse, if we think about an annual inflation rate of 4%, that will drive the future cost of a widget to 48, meaning the same $100, if that was put under a mattress for 40 years, that $100 now only able to buy 2.1 widgets, representing a 79% loss in purchasing power. If inflation long-term average was 5.5, you can see the figures there, erodes close to 90%. So again, although inflation, not inherently bad, is a sign of a growing economy, the emphasis that the Federal Reserve places on keeping that growth in check is a function of not allowing the purchasing power of currency, of capital today, to be meaningfully eroded down the road. That is why, at times, Federal Reserve is even willing to forcibly cause a recession, although that is never the intent. Often that is the outcome of a very restrictive fiscal and monetary policy that references a historic rise in rates that we've seen. Again, at times that may be necessary, and while painful over the short term, certainly we can understand looking at these figures here, if inflation is not properly addressed and tackled, reined under control, you have much more severe longer term consequences. So that's all for this week. As always, appreciate you taking the time to join us, and please send any additional questions you'd like me to take a deeper dive in the future.